Migration. Oh my goodness. Why do people move? That's our big question for this particular unit. And there's a lot to break down with migration. And if I'm honest, I do like the idea of reducing a lot of migration down into those two big factors: push factors and pull factors. Push factors are going to be anything that pushes somebody away from a particular place. A pull factor is going to bring them right back in. So let's get to the reading. This video is for 3.1 to 3.6. I am going to read all of the goodies to you and give you my little breakdown. So when you are doing your notes and you are looking for like, what do I write down? I'll help you out. So starting with 3.1, the key issue here with 3.1 are where are migrants distributed? So like, where do they go? Global migration patterns. The United States is the leading destination for international migrants. I wonder why we're going to focus on the United States. Leading destination for them. The migration transition is related to the demographic transition. Oh, all right, here we go. Migration is a permanent move to a new location. It is a form of relocation diffusion, which was defined in Chapter 1 as the spread of a characteristic through the bodily movement of people from one place to another. Emigration is migration from a location. Immigration or in-migration is migration to a location. The difference between the number of immigrants and the number of emigrants is the net migration. Geography has no comprehensive theory of migration, although an outline of migration laws written by 19th century geographer E.G. Ravenstein is the basis for contemporary geographic migration studies. To understand where and why migration occurs, Ravenstein's laws can be organized into three groups. One, distance that migrants typically move, reasons why migrants move, and the characteristics of migrants. Distance of migration. Ravenstein formulated laws for the distance that migrants travel to their new homes. Most migrants relocate a short distance and remain within the same country. Long distance migrants to other countries head for major centers of economic activity. Migration can be divided into internal migration and international migration. Internal migration is a permanent move within the same country. So like going from Wabash to Chicago. Internal. International is a permanent move from one country to another. So going from the United States to Germany. I don't know, anything. Internal migration can be divided into interregional migration, which is movement from one region of a country to another. So East Coast to West Coast, for example. And intra-regional migration, which is movement within one region. So again, Wabash to Indianapolis, both are in the same part of the country, same region. About 9% of the world's people are international migrants. That is, they currently live in countries other than the ones in which they were born. On a global scale, the three largest flows of migrants are from Latin America to North America, from Asia to Europe, and from Asia to North America. So already you see that the United States is clearly a migrant destination. And we have a wonderful little graph here about Mexico's international and internal migration. You see the black arrows going from this part of Mexico to here, this part of Mexico to here. International migration. This is the one that usually gets talked about a lot. You see that arrow going from Central America? Yeah, there's a lot of countries in Central America. And once you look up the history of a lot of the countries in Central America, Belize, El Salvador, Panama, the United States has involved themselves there. And people usually want to leave there. They go through Mexico and look at that state. That looks like Texas. Yeah, well, because Texas is usually the state where a lot of Texans don't want Mexicans going through their border. But you're in my geography class. You'll learn that a lot of those migrants probably aren't Mexican. Why not? Because other countries are facing some sort of turmoil, and those migrants are going just through Mexico to get to the United States. There, I said it. It's also pretty true. Okay, the migration transition. Geographer William Zelinsky identified a migration transition, which consists of changes in a society comparable to those in the demographic transition. The migration transition is a change in the migration pattern in a society that results from the social and economic changes that also produce the demographic transition. Those are two words again: social and economic. According to the migration transition, international migration is primarily a phenomenon of countries in stage 2 of the demographic transition, whereas internal migration is more important in stages 3 and 4. The global pattern in 3.15 reflects the importance of migration from developing countries in stage 2 of the demographic transition to developed countries. Asia, Latin America, and Africa have net out migration, and North America, Europe, and the South Pacific have net in migration. Migrants from countries with relatively low incomes and high natural increase rates head for relatively wealthy countries where job prospects are brighter. So again, one of the biggest issues with migration is that countries in stage 2 of the demographic transition, so those like high birth rates, natural increase rates really high, are leaving. Okay. If I were you, I would pause the video now and write this stuff down right here. Hopefully you see my mouse, because it's very good insight. If you're looking at the CIA World Fact Book, you're going to see the difference at this point between a stage 2, 3, and 4. Stage 2 countries, a lot of out migration. People want to leave there. Stage 3 and 4, people are probably heading there for a particular reason. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. Changing United States immigration. The United States has had 3 main eras of immigration. The principal source of migrants has changed in each era. The United States plays a special role in the study of international migration. The world's 3rd most populous country is inhabited overwhelmingly by direct descendants of immigrants. The United States has had 3 main eras of immigration: colonial settlement in the 17th and 18th centuries, mass European immigration in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Asian and Latin American immigration in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Immigrants are not distributed uniformly throughout the United States. More than 1/2 of recent immigrants head for 4 states: California, Florida, New York, or Texas. And there are a lot of goodies here about US immigration. If you are looking at this, like doing your notes as I'm reading to you, again, I pause it, read this. This is great. Pause it, read this. It's really great. Where are we getting our immigrants from? Boom, boom, boom. Right in there. And again, you have another really good graph. I would pause it. I don't have time to read all of this big stuff, but pause it, look at it. How has our immigration pattern changed? Brown is Europe. Okay. And then it went way down in the 30s and 40s. I wonder why. Yeesh. 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 I know why, but I won't tell you. There's a great crash course video about it. Moving on to the next one, because Mr. Wenrich accidentally gave us 2 parts. All right, interregional migration. Interregional migrants settled the Western United States. Interregional migration occurs in other large countries. Interregional migration can involve long distances in large countries. In the past, people migrated from one region of a country to another in search of better farmland. Lack of farmland pushed many people from the more densely settled regions of the country and lured them to the frontier where land was abundant. Today, the principal type of interregional migration is from rural to urban areas. Most jobs, especially in the service sector, are clustered in urban areas. Interregional migration in the United States. One of the most famous examples of interregional migration is the opening of the American West. At the time of independence, the United States consisted of a collection of settlements concentrated on the Atlantic coast. Through mass interregional migration, the rest of the continent was settled and developed. The US Census Bureau computes the country's population center at the time of each census. The changing location of the center of the US population graphically demonstrates the interregional migration of the American people westward across the North American continent over the past 225 years. In the 21st century, Americans are still moving toward the West, but increasingly now are moving southward. Okay, so what that little paragraph pretty much just said is that the United States started on the East Coast. That's Delaware. Delaware is the first state, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, the 13 original colonies. And then ever since the 13 original colonies were established, people have been moving west. For example, Indiana became a state after Massachusetts. Why? Because Indiana wasn't an original 13 colony. We moved west. And the more west you move, the later those states became actual states. It's pretty cool to see that. And what that second part of that little bit there said was, okay, as you're moving west, that's still happening, but now a lot of Americans are moving south. Arizona, New Mexico, Florida, Alabama, meh, but mostly Arizona and Florida are where a lot of people tend to migrate to. Real quick, before I show you that map, this little bit here is really interesting. I don't know if this little link will work, but you learning about the Trail of Tears is going to be very good for you, because there's a lot of history of forced migration in this country. Just ask me about the Japanese people during World War II. There's your cheat code. You want me to talk about civics during geography? There's your cheat code for migration. And oh, I don't want to forget about this. The changing center of the US population. So here's the center, geographic center, as the country progresses. And you can see now some different eras of migration, not immigration, but just straight migration within the United States, interregional. Interregional migration in other large countries. Long distance interregional migration has opened new regions for development in large countries other than the United States. Canada. As in the United States, Canada has had significant interregional migration from east to west for more than a century. The three westernmost provinces, Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan, are the destinations for most interregional migrants within Canada. Net outmigration is being recorded in provinces from Manitoba eastward. China. An estimated 100 million people have emigrated from rural areas in the interior of the country. They are headed for the large urban areas along the East Coast where jobs are most plentiful, especially in factories. The government once severely limited the ability of Chinese people to make interregional moves, but restrictions have been lifted in recent years. Brazil. Most Brazilians live in a string of large cities near the Atlantic coast. In contrast, Brazil's tropical interior is very sparsely inhabited. To increase the attractiveness of the interior, the government moved its capital in 1960 from Rio to a newly built city called Brasilia, situated 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles from the Atlantic coast. Development of Brazil's interior has altered historic migration patterns. The coastal areas now have net out migration, whereas the interior areas have net in migration. And what nobody talks about with that migration stuff in Brazil is when they're moving into the inside of Brazil, that's where the Amazon rainforest is. Is it a good thing to cut down a lot of the rainforest to build cities? I wonder. Yeah, not the best. The population of Russia is highly clustered in the Western or European portion of the country. To open up the sparsely inhabited Asian portion of Russia, interregional migration was important in the former Soviet Union. Soviet policy encouraged factory construction near raw materials rather than near existing population concentrations. To build up an adequate labor force, the Soviet government had to force people to undertake interregional migration. All right, intra-regional migration. Most intra-regional migration traditionally has been from rural to urban areas. Intra-regional migration in developed countries is increasingly from cities to suburbs. This one here is one of the reasons why Wabash is facing a big migration problem. People are moving away from Wabash and moving to Indianapolis. They're moving to Chicago. They're moving to Fort Wayne. That's me. But I also fit a larger pattern. And I know from my anecdotal experience, I have plenty of reasons why I should leave Wabash. Believe me, I do. And I don't need to explain them. But a lot of people feel like me. So the trick to solving Wabash's migration problem is literally young people, not you. You guys are going to be creating new ideas. Unless Wabash goes through its shift, I am probably not moving back to this city. I'll move to the country though. Yeah, it's all very interesting. But this is what that idea literally means. It's intra-regional migration. Most intra-regional migration traditionally has been from rural to urban areas. Intra-regional migration in developed countries is increasingly from cities to suburbs. Intra-regional migration is much more common than interregional or international migration. Most intra-regional migration is from rural to urban areas in developing countries and from cities to suburbs in developed countries. Migration from rural or non-metropolitan areas to urban or metropolitan areas began in the 1800s in Europe and North America as part of the Industrial Revolution. The percentage of people living in urban areas in the United States, for example, increased from 5% in 1800 to 50% in 1920 and 81% in 2013. Yeah, a lot of people live in cities, the urban area. In recent years, urbanization has diffused to developing countries of Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Between 1950 and 2013, the percentage living in urban areas increased from 40% to 78% in Latin America, from 15% to 46% in Asia, and from 10% to 37% in sub-Saharan Africa. As with interregional migrants, most people who move from rural to urban areas seek economic advancement. They are pushed from rural areas by declining opportunities in agriculture and are pulled to the cities by the prospect of work in factories or in service areas, industries. Excuse me. Most intra-regional migration in developed countries is from cities out to surrounding suburbs. The population of most cities in developed countries has declined since the mid-19th century, while suburbs have grown rapidly. Nearly twice as many Americans migrate from cities to suburbs each year as migrate from suburbs to cities. Comparable patterns are found in Canada and Europe. The major reason for the large-scale migration to the suburbs is not related to employment, as is the case with other forms of migration. For most people, Migration to suburbs does not coincide with changing jobs. Instead, people are pulled by a suburban lifestyle. Suburbs offer the opportunity to live in a detached house rather than an apartment, surrounded by a private yard where children can play safely. A garage or driveway on the property guarantees space to park cars at no extra charge. In the United States, suburban schools tend to be more modern, better equipped, and safer than those in cities. Cars and trains enable people to live in suburbs, yet have access to jobs, shops, and recreational facilities throughout the urban area. As a result of suburbanization, the territory occupied by urban areas has rapidly expanded. To accommodate suburban growth, farms on the periphery of urban areas are converted to housing and commercial developments where new roads, sewers, and other services must be built. Ask anybody who has driven through Indianapolis over the last 30 years. I'm 34 years old and I remember driving to Indianapolis and Fishers, Noblesville, Carmel, even. There wasn't much of anything there. Now there's anything that you want. That's what suburbanization looks like. And what was there before these awesome like malls and whatnot, especially in Carmel and Fishers, Noblesville, there were farms, absolutely nothing there. Now a lot of people are there. So moving on, migration from urban to rural areas. Developed countries witnessed a new migration trend beginning in the late 20th century. For the first time, more people immigrated into rural areas than emigrated out of them. Net migration from urban to rural areas is called counter-urbanization. The boundary where suburbs end and the countryside begins cannot be precisely defined. Counter-urbanization results in part from very rapid expansion of suburbs, but most counter-urbanization represents genuine migration from cities and suburbs to small towns and rural communities. As with suburbanization, people move from urban to rural areas for lifestyle reasons. Some are lured to rural areas by the prospect of swapping the frantic pace of urban life for the opportunity to live on a farm where they can own horses or grow vegetables. Others move to farms but do not earn their living from agriculture. Instead, they work in nearby offices, small town shops, or other services. In the United States, evidence of counter-urbanization can be seen primarily in the Rocky Mountain states. Rural counties in states such as Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming have experienced net in-migration. With modern communications and transportation systems, location in a developed country is truly isolated, either economically or socially. Computers, tablets, and smartphones enable us to work anywhere and still have access to an international network. We can buy most products online and have them delivered within a few days. We can follow the fortunes of our favorite teams anywhere in the country thanks to satellite dishes and webcasts. Intra-regional migration has slowed during the early 21st century as a result of the severe recession. Intra-regional migrants who moved primarily for lifestyle reasons rather than for jobs found that they couldn't get loans to buy new homes and couldn't find buyers for their own homes. So, lots to break down there. Number one, everything that was said about with modern communications, this book was written in 2014. Boy, that was spot on because that's kind of what's going on now since the pandemic. People are moving to smaller areas that have cheaper houses. They can get stuff to grow a family. They've got space to move. People don't have to live in big cities to work anymore. Do people want to still move to cities? Yeah. But with counter urbanization, rural areas can expand. And technically, that's the kind of the point of that Imagine 185 event. You've got communities in this part of Indiana that are growing. Technically, they're rural, but they're not moving to Wabash. We got to do something about it. We got to change, whether you like change or not. All right, 3.5. Why do people migrate? Thanks for hanging in there. I know this is a long video, but there's a lot of goodies here. Reasons to migrate. People migrate for political, environmental, and economic reasons. A combination of push and pull factors influence migration decisions. Ravenstein's laws help geographers explain the reasons why people migrate. Most people migrate for economic reasons. Political and environmental reasons discussed in this section also induce migration, although not as frequently as economic reasons. One of these three reasons usually emerges as most important, although elements of more than one reason may be detectable. Ranking the relative importance of the three reasons may be difficult and even controversial. People migrate because of push factors and pull factors. A push factor forces people out of their present location. A pull factor pulls people to a new location. Sorry, I know I didn't use the word induces, but you might as well use mine because it means the exact same thing. A push forces you out. Get out of here. Pull, get in here. See, I pulled. No. Yeah, I try. Okay. As migration for most people is a major step, not taken lightly, both push and pull factors typically play a role. To migrate, people view their current place of residence so negatively that they feel pushed away, and they view another place so positively that they feel pulled toward it. So when you're looking at push and pull factors, you have to remember there's both at play. You get pushed away from one place, you get pulled into another place. You don't just get pushed away and just kind of go wherever you want to go. You've got to make a decision. And when you make a decision, you're there. Political migration occurs because of political conflict. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees, or UNHCR, recognizes three groups of people who are forced to migrate for political reasons. A refugee has been forced to migrate to another country to avoid the effects of armed conflict, situations of generalized violence, violations of human rights, or other disasters, and cannot return for fear of persecution because of race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or political opinion. An internally displaced person, or IDP, has been forced to migrate for similar political reasons as a refugee, but has not migrated across an international border. So if you remember that when disaster strikes video, those are internally displaced persons. Okay, finally, an asylum seeker is someone who has migrated to another country in the hope of being recognized as a refugee. The UN counted 16.7 million refugees, 33.3 IDPs, and 1.2 million other politically forced migrants in 2013. Okay, so this little bit here is super interesting. The pink and purple are going to tell you where a lot of migrants are coming from. The teal bluish stuff, where they're going. And looky there, there's the United States. Oh, wow, I wonder why people are leaving Colombia. Oh, wow, I wonder why people are leaving Somalia. Yeesh. So anything that's highlighted means there's more than 100,000 people internally displaced. There's a lot of countries that have similar issues. Environmental reasons for migrating. People sometimes migrate for environmental reasons, pulled toward physically attractive regions and pushed from hazardous ones. In this age of improved communications and transportation systems, People can live in environmentally attractive areas that are relatively remote and still not feel too isolated from employment, shopping, and entertainment opportunities. Attractive environments for migrants include mountains, seasides, and warm climates. Proximity to the Rocky Mountains lures Americans to the state of Colorado, and the Alps pull people to eastern France. Some migrants are shocked to find polluted air and congestion in such areas. The southern coast of England, the Mediterranean coast of France, and the coast of Florida attract migrants, especially retirees who enjoy swimming and lying on the beach. Of all elderly people who migrate from one US state to another, 1/3 select Florida as their destination. Regions with warm winters, such as southern Spain and the southwestern United States, attract migrants from harsher climates. Migrants are also pushed from their homes by adverse physical conditions. Water, either too much or too little, poses the most common environmental threat. Many people are forced to move by water related disasters because they live in a vulnerable area, such as a floodplain. The floodplain of a river is the area subject to flooding during a specific number of years based on historical records. People living in the quote 100-year floodplain, for example, can expect flooding on average once every century. Many people are unaware that they live in a floodplain, and even people who do know often choose to live there anyways. A lack of water pushes others from there and their home, and hundreds of thousands have been forced to move from the Sahel region of Africa because of drought conditions. The people of the Sahel have traditionally been pastoral nomads, a form of agriculture adapted to dry lands, but effective only at low population densities. That's kind of what we're talking about with Somalia. Okay. The capacity of the Sahel to sustain human life, never very high, has declined recently because of population growth and several years of unusually low rainfall. Consequently, many of these nomads have been forced to move into cities and rural camps where they survive on food donated by the government and international relief organizations. An environmental or political feature that hinders migration is an intervening obstacle. The principal obstacle traditionally faced by migrants to other countries was environmental, the long, arduous, and expensive passage over land or sea. Transportation improvements that have promoted globalization, such as motor vehicles and airplanes, have diminished the importance of environmental features as intervening obstacles. A lot to break down there. Some people like living in a floodplain, some people don't. Some people have to face environmental intervening obstacles, but you probably can assume that there are political, economic, cultural, and social intervening obstacles as well. That was rude. Hopefully you're not tired. We just have one more section to go in this video, and you're halfway done with your notes. Okay. Migrating to find work. Most people migrate in search of work. Some migrant workers send remittances to their home countries. Ooh, you need to know what a remittance is. Most people migrate for economic reasons. Most people move for economic reasons. Most people move for economic reasons. Economics, big reason for migration. People often emigrate from places that have few job opportunities and immigrate to places where jobs seem to be available. Because of economic restructuring, job prospects often vary from one country to another and within regions of the same country. The United States and Canada have been especially prominent destinations for economic migrants. Many European immigrants to North America in the 19th century truly expected to find streets paved with gold. While not literally so gilded, the United States and Canada did offer Europeans prospect for economic advancement. The same perception of economic plenty now lures people to the United States and Canada from Latin America and Asia. The relative attractiveness of a region can shift with economic change. Ireland was a place of net out migration through most of the 19th and 20th centuries. Dire economic conditions produced a net out migration in excess of 200,000 a year during the 1850s. We also know something else was going on in Ireland in the 1850s. The Irish potato famine. The pattern reversed during the 1990s as economic prosperity made Ireland a destination for immigrants, especially from Eastern Europe. However, the collapse of Ireland's economy as part of the severe global recession starting in 2008 brought a return to net out migration. It is sometimes difficult to distinguish between migrants seeking economic opportunities and refugees fleeing from government persecution. The distinction between economic migrants and refugees is important because the United States, Canada, and European countries treat the two groups differently. Economic migrants and refugees, we treat them differently. Economic migrants are generally not admitted unless they possess special skills or have a close relative already there. And even then, they must compete with similar applicants from other countries. However, refugees receive special priority in admission to other countries. People unable to migrate permanently to a new country for employment opportunities may be allowed to migrate temporarily. Prominent forms of temporary work are found in Europe and Asia. There you go. We'll stop it there and kind of just roll from there. I will make another video later. You'll probably see me wearing something else besides my bird shirt. But just a real quick review. Mostly people move for economic reasons, and you again can be pushed and pulled for those particular regions. There is a form of intra-regional migration, so moving within the same country. And again, there's push and pull factors there as well. There's obvious environmental reasons for migration, but for me and my class, let's stick with a good old PEX filter. So that being said, that's what I want you to know for 3.1 to 3.6. Another video. Let's finish out your notes. Goodbye.